Hey everyone, it's Allie and welcome to my channel, and today I am super excited to be finally sharing with you my mid-year book freakout tag. Alright, so yeah, it's like nearing the end of August, and I just realized that I never did the book freakout tag. I think it's fun to answer the questions and just reflect back on the year so far. So hopefully you guys don't mind that I'm doing this basically 2 months late, but by this point you probably have watched everybody else's, so maybe it's actually the perfect time. But alright, I think that there are technically maybe like 12 to 15 different questions that people often answer. I kind of just went through and picked the 10 that I felt were most applicable to me and like the types of books I read. But before we get into the questions, I will just give you my current stats, and these stats are as of Wednesday, August 21st, a little bit more than halfway through the year. I do have a Goodreads account. That is where I like to track the books that I'm reading, so if you want to see what I'm reading in real time, definitely follow me over there, because the second I finish a book, I am posting my review on Goodreads. So as of today, I have read 47 books, and I did make my goal 50 books this year. The last couple, I did make the goal 100. So if I had that 100 book goal, I would be behind. But yeah, I don't really care that much about the goal. I just think it's fun to just track how many books you've read in a given year. So I do kind of like that I gave myself a goal that I knew I would achieve, just because I'm not seeing behind schedule, because even though mentally I really don't care, it does kind of get to you in a way. But okay, now let's get into the questions. What is the best book you've read so far? A lot of these I'm giving like 2 or 3 answers just because I feel like it's so hard to pick, especially if you do read a large range of genres like I do. Okay, sorry if I adjust a little bit throughout this video. For each question, I'm gonna be getting up and getting the books. But I did pull out, I think, my top 3. This was pretty hard for me to choose, but I feel like these are just ones that have stuck with me so far. They're gonna stick with me in years to come. I'm positive I'm gonna reread all 3 of these at some point. So the first one I'll share is All the Ever Afters, which was such a surprise to me. This is by Danielle Teller. It is the untold story of Cinderella's stepmother. I'm someone, I really do like fantasy, but specifically more than anything, I really like fairy tale retellings. I like when there is like some historical fiction mixed in. I definitely do like other kinds of fantasy too, but the ones that just really have my heart are the ones that are tied to like a fairy tale in some way. And the reason that I personally really liked this is because, one, it was a very unique take, I would say, on the Cinderella story, which of course has been done so many different times, but also because this book is very much a historical fiction book. Like, it's very much historical fiction, and then the Cinderella story ties into it, but it is its very own unique story. So even if you're not a big fairy tale person, but you just like historical fiction, I would highly recommend this. I thought it was very well written. I was definitely interested in it the entire time, and I am very sad to say that this author, Danielle Teller, she really hasn't written like anything else. I think she has written maybe another book that's nonfiction that I do want to look into, but I think that's it. And this is not like a super recent book. Yeah, it came out in 2018, so hoping she's well and hoping she writes some more books, because I loved this. This one I was interested in for a while. It's The Devil in the White City. Hopefully the glare is not too bad. This is by Erik Larson. I'm on a mission to read a lot more nonfiction, because I feel like every time I do read nonfiction that I'm interested in, I do really end up liking it a lot. But I love Erik Larson's storytelling abilities. He's kind of like a pro, I think, about making a nonfiction story read like fiction. And this is the only one of his I've read so far, although I do have another one on my TBR list for this month of August. But I'm pretty sure that in a lot of his books, he kind of ties together 2 different stories just to make it a little bit more interesting. And he tends to write about events that people might have heard of, but then he really brings a unique take to it and brings to the surface maybe some like lesser known stories that are connected to that larger story. Like the one that I'm going to read this month is about the Lusitania, but then there's also going to be stories about some of the people that are on it, I think, some murder, some romance. So it's not just like a general book about the Lusitania. But back to this one, this is about the World Fair, which took place in Chicago in 1893, which I just am very fascinated by that time of life. I feel like I'd heard of the World Fair before, but didn't really know that much about it. But he ties all this fantastic detail about the World Fair and its creation and its architects and everything. He ties that with a serial killer who was living in Chicago at the time. So like every basic girl, I love to listen to stories about serial killers, hope to never meet one in my life. But I found this book so interesting, beautifully written, and according to a lot of you guys, you like Erik Larson as well. So if you've never given him a shot before, I would highly recommend. There's a lot of us who think he's great. And then finally, we've got a blank book. But no, this is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And like nonfiction, I really do want to challenge myself to read more of the great classics. And my sister is an English person. We both are English people, but kind of in different ways. I'm a bit more creative writing, and my sister does like analyzing the classics. She did encourage me to give East of Eden a try, and I really liked it. And I think a lot of people would if they gave it a chance. It's just such an interesting story that I don't even want to say too much about because you kind of have to uncover it as you read. But it basically follows these two different families in California and how they're tied together. And there's a little bit of mystery and thriller type vibes to this that I was not expecting at all. So I'd recommend it, but give yourself like a solid week to get through it. Take your time with this book and just enjoy it. So I do want to read more from him for sure. I think Grapes of Wrath will be what I read next. Okay, question 2. I will try not to blab on so much, but the best sequel you've read so far. So I would say I identified 2 sequels from this year. The first is The Ballad of Never After, which is by Stephanie Garber, and this is part of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. This was a series that I was not expecting to love just because I thought it was just like another romantasy series, which I do like some of them, but I don't like smut, so I don't like a lot of them for that reason. But I thought that this would be a series that maybe I didn't even finish, maybe I wouldn't even get through the first book, but I really loved the first book. These are kind of tied to fairy tales, so I really like that. And so far they've been very clean. I've read the first 2. I know there is a third one out that I need to get to. So if you are looking for a clean romantasy book that is more connected to like fairy tales than more of the elf system, which I know a lot of romantasy books are connected with, I would highly recommend the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So this is the second one. This is The Ballad of Never After, and I do think I gave the first one, Once Upon a Broken Heart, 4.5 stars, just because I did think it took a little bit to get into it, but this second book I just absolutely devoured, and I am going to get the third book as soon as it is available in paperback. And then another series that I have been absolutely loving is the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith. I've been slowly collecting these books from thrift stores and library book sales and things like that over the last few months, and I think I have all of them except one at this point, so I am into the series now. I just finished the third one this month out of 7, and I think an 8th one is coming out next year. So this is the second book. This is The Silkworm. The first one is called The Cuckoo's Calling, and it's basically just a detective series, which a lot of times I don't really like that much. I feel like they can get a little bit boring, a little bit dry, but this is written by J.K. Rowling. Robert Galbraith is her pen name for this detective series, and she's just such a fantastic author. I feel like anything she writes is going to be good, and I love her character development. There's kind of just like the classic moody male detective, and then he's got this younger female assistant who is a good foil to his character, I guess. And the mysteries have been really good so far, and I haven't been able to see any of the endings coming. But this book, the second book, had a really crazy, gruesome mystery. Definitely didn't feel like anything that I'd ever read before. So yeah, both of those series I would say overall are gonna be 5-star series. Question number 3, a new release you haven't read yet but want to. So there are a lot of books that came out this year that I want to get to, but I tend to like to wait until they inevitably show up on Book Outlet because they do get a lot of very popular books that are overflow from like Target and Costco and places like that. But I do have a feeling a lot of these books that I'm interested in from this year will be on there probably either later this year or early next year. But top of my list is The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden, and that is, I think it's the third book in the Housemaid series, and I really, really like the first two. Frida McFadden is very interesting to me. I don't quite understand how she cranks out all of these books, and I know the Housemaid series is very similar to another thriller that did come out first called The Last Mrs. Parrish. Another one that is top of my list is Daughter of Mine by Megan Miranda, and she's not my favorite thriller author. I feel like I read some of the best ones from her like earlier on in my reading career with her, I guess you would say. Yeah, I'm looking up at my shelf and I have read 6 books by her already, and I think I might have another one up on my TBR shelf. So I read basically everything she puts out. I enjoy them all. Some I enjoy more than others, but I would recommend her if you do like thrillers. So there are lots more that I am excited about, but the third one I'll mention is The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Janie Chang. I haven't read anything by Janie Chang, and I've only read, I think, one by Kate Quinn, and I really, really liked it. So it's nice when you find an author who you know has written a good amount of other books that you can go back and read eventually. But I've heard really good things about this book. I'm not really sure what it's actually about, but it is a historical fiction, which I do really love to read, especially in the winter. And then question 4, my most anticipated release for the second half of 2024. I will be honest, I was looking at lists of what is still to come out, and I don't think like every single title has been released yet. The release date hasn't been released, but I just feel like a lot of the authors who I like to read that put out new books this year, they've already come out. So yeah, like I said earlier, there's many, many more books than those other 3 that I just mentioned that I do want to read. But honestly, I saw this book called The Ultimate Fun Activity Book that's coming out December 10th, and it looks like what it sounds like. It is an ultimate fun activity book, and I'm really excited to get that. It has nothing to do with fiction or whatever, but that's just something that I thought, wow, I would really like to do that. But then actually I did see that Marcus Zusak, or Zusik, I don't know how you say his name, but he wrote The Book Thief, which is one of my favorite books. He hasn't actually put a lot out. He did also write another thick one called Bridge of Clay, which I did read this month in August, so you'll be hearing about that in my next review. But he is putting out a memoir, I guess, in like October or November, and I do really like his writing style. I am interested in his life. He is an Australian guy, and I am interested in Australia. So that's one I for sure will read at some point. I don't think I'm gonna like buy it the second it comes out, but again, I will be looking for that on Book Outlet at some point. So question 5 is biggest disappointment. So I picked these 2 books, not like the 2 lowest books of the year for me, but truly just biggest disappointment, just in the sense that I had a lot of expectation for them and they were still good, but they just didn't quite deliver for me personally. So the first one is Stuart Turton's The Last Murder at the End of the World. Stuart Turton wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and I read that I think last fall, and I just absolutely loved it. Looked him up. He was a pretty new author. I think that was his debut, but he wrote another one that he put out last year called The Devil in the Dark Water. And then this, I'm pretty sure, is his third, The Last Murder at the End of the World. So unfortunately for me, it's kind of gone from best to worst, but that's because he is a very unique author in the sense that he just likes to write very interesting mysteries. And he kind of even said, I think at the end of this book, that this might not be for everybody, and that's okay. And I'm okay with that too, honestly. I would rather an author be very creative and write what they're inspired to write than just kind of do a cookie cutter formula where you know everyone who liked your first book will like all your books. So yeah, all of his books have been quite different. The first one was set in like a mansion and there was like a murder mystery going on, so I love that. The second one was set on a boat, so also very cool. I love books set on boats. This one is set like far into the future and it's more like post-apocalyptic, which is just not my personal favorite. I'm not a big sci-fi person, but overall the story was still good. I think I might have given this either a 4 or 4.5, but just for me, this was a little bit of a disappointment because I liked his other ones a good bit more. And then unfortunately for me, this one really was not my favorite, but I know a lot of people disagree with that statement, and that's okay. We all have our own opinions. But this is Kristen Hanna's The Women, and Kristen Hanna is interesting because she started out her career writing a lot of chick lit, which is not my favorite now. I pretty much never pick up chick lit anymore. But when I was reading, like in my earlier 20s, maybe mid-20s, I feel like I was more interested in the genre. So I did read a lot of her chick lit then, and I do like her writing style. But she's kind of since switched over to more historical fiction, and I have really, really enjoyed a lot of her historical fiction books. My personal favorites so far are The Four Winds and The Great Alone. The Four Winds is connected to the Dust Bowl, which I didn't know much about, and then The Great Alone is set in like very rural Alaska, which I thought was just super interesting. So kind of like Stuart Turton, she writes about all different areas, and I absolutely admire her for that. This one is connected more to the Vietnam War, which I really didn't know much about the Vietnam War myself, and I just feel like a lot of historical books are not really written during that time period. So I like the idea of this book. I liked the main character, but for me, I just felt like there was too much going on. It almost felt like it needed to be either longer or even split into two books. So that was my complaint. I didn't really feel a big connection to a lot of the characters just because things were moving so fast. But I did like the idea of the story overall. It was following a woman in Vietnam and kind of her experience after she got back. So a lot of important information in here. I definitely came away with a lot more knowledge about the war and how people were treated. So I would still recommend it, and I think this has like over a 4.5 average rating on Goodreads, but this I think I actually ended up giving about a 3.5 or 3.75. Question 7, favorite new to you author discovered in 2024. So this author I technically discovered in 2023, but 2024 is the year that I've just been eating up her books. And that is Miss Lisa Jewell, who thankfully has been around for a while, so I've still got a lot of books to get through from her. But this is the book that really started it all for me last summer. I did get this, as you can see, from Book of the Month, I think last July of 2023, or August, sorry. But I kind of got this just thinking, okay, just another thriller book. I do like to get a lot of the thrillers from Book of the Month, but I absolutely devoured this book. I thought it was so good, easy 5 stars, and a lot of thrillers I enjoy, but they end up getting either 4 or 4.5 stars from me. And looking back, I've read 4 other books from Lisa Jewell this year, and I'm just kind of slowly collecting them every time I do find them at like a book sale or on Book Outlet or whatever, and I have not found one that has really disappointed me yet. This one still remains as one of my favorites, but I've really enjoyed them all. And I read a lot of thrillers, and I would say Lisa Jewell is solidly like a top 3 thriller author for me now. So super excited that I still have a good amount of books to get through, and I think she's one who puts out a book pretty much every year. So didn't really discover her in 2024, but just discovered how much I really liked her this year. And then question 8 is newest favorite character. And this is a really tough one. I would say the character Samuel from East of Eden, who is just like this likable older guy. He's got a bunch of kids, and he's just a little bit sassy. He's a little bit sarcastic, and I just like him a lot. So yeah, again, read East of Eden to hear more about his character. And then my other favorite character, I think so far, has been Jack from the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. Again, a little bit snarky, a little bit sassy. I do like that in a character. I feel like the dialogue is just often very fun to read. And I feel like Stephanie Garber has done a really good job with his character development in the books. You kind of start out not really liking him that much, and then you kind of see different sides to him. But yeah, I just like his dialogue. I like his personality. I like the banter with him and the main character. Question 9 is a book that made you cry. And I picked out 2 because one was sad and one was happy. So the sad tears came from 19 Steps by Miss Millie Bobby Brown. And I have since found out, since doing my review of this book, that Millie Bobby Brown didn't write this at all. I thought maybe she wrote it, but then she just had somebody like really heavily edit it for her. But I think she just gave a ghostwriter the idea for the book and maybe provided a little bit more information about a relative of hers that was involved in the big event that happens in this story. So this does take place in London during the Second World War, and there is a specific event that happens in London that I don't want to get into because that's going to be a big spoiler. But I like that this was set during that time, but it wasn't following like actual military people, because I think that can be a little bit repetitive. And I had definitely never heard of this event before. And I will just say that it definitely did make me cry of sadness, but I did like it overall, and I really did like how it ended. And then another book that made me cry was The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. I really, really like this author. She wrote The Wishing Game last year, which was an easy 5 stars from me. I think this one is a little bit more 4.5 stars. But she's an author who writes for adults, but there are like very strong ties to kind of like middle grade stories, which I absolutely love. There are just some really sweet moments in this book. There are some sad moments in there as well, but I felt very moved when I read it, so I did shed some tears when I read this one. And then for my last question, what is the most beautiful book you've bought or received? So I don't have them down here with me, but I did recently get from a library book sale for $10, 10 gorgeous green classic books that I think look really good in my office. Can't believe that I got them for only $1 a piece, and there are a lot of really good classics, and some of them I haven't read yet, so I probably will actually read from those books. But alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully maybe you added a couple books to your TBR list. And if you did like the video, please make sure to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe, because it really does help my channel out a lot. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!